Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Sharon Strimling. Sharon Strimling is a youth resilience coach and educator, and you can find out more about Sharon Strimling and her wonderful work at her website, sharonstrimling.com. Welcome, Sharon Strimling.
Oh, thank you so much, Catherine. It is such a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate being coming onto your wonderful show.
So we're here, everybody, to talk about a super, super important subject, which is what we can all do to prevent youth suicide. Super important subject, because we love our loved ones and they often don't have the skill sets that some of our adults do. So Sharon Strimling, will you start for our audience by putting this in perspective and sharing this current statistics about youth suicide?
Sure. So we'll start with, I think, what will be a very sobering picture. I think we all know, many of us know that and care about the fact that things are out of control with our youth and with mental health. And just a preview that this conversation, this program will get more and more uplifting, because there are solutions, there are ways we can go. But I just, I don't usually use notes, but I wanted to pull this up so people could really have a sense of what's going on right now. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34 in the US right now. That's a staggering number. This is off the NAMI website, National Association for Mental Health. It has increased 35% since 1999. What we've been going through with COVID has been significant, but it is not the only thing going on. This has been a trend for a while. I just want to say that there is a National Suicide Prevention Hotline, a lifeline. It is 1-800-273-TALK, which is 8255 is TALK, or call 911. I want to say that from the start, because we don't always control what happens, and we can give all our best information, but NAMI has that phone number posted, and I just want people to know it's there. There are resources. There is a delightful talk by Michael Neal. It's a TED Talk called "Why Aren't We Awesomer?" And he speaks about calling the suicide hotline one time. And it's actually a funny story, but it really helped him. So 1 in 5 adults experienced mental illness in 2020, just to give a sense of what's happening beyond maybe our closest friends and family. 70% of youth in the juvenile justice system have been diagnosed with a mental health condition, and 37% of adults incarcerated in the state and federal prison systems have a diagnosed mental illness. So things are rough statistically, and the suicide numbers are particularly concerning. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than straight youth. Transgender, nearly 12 times. So just for us to be super aware of what's happening in our young people across the board, from all walks of life, this is an issue, and we want to be there to help them. So do you want to add to that before I go on to some of the good news?
Well, I think we need to start for our audience by recognizing that it really is a significant issue. And my statistics are that globally, close to 800,000 people die every year from suicide. This is people of all ages. That's actually twice the number of people who die from homicide. Yeah. And that's basically one person every 40 seconds loses their life to suicide. So again, it's a global phenomenon. And my statistics from previous research was that during the coronavirus pandemic, that levels of anxiety and depression for people of all age groups increased about a 30%.
Yes.
Right. So it's a mental health pandemic, as well as being, a coronavirus pandemic. So it's something that if you are listening to this broadcast and you have a young person in your life that you want to watch out for, you want to really be aware of this information. You want to be aware of the risk factors. And the other thing, statistics wise, is that most recent statistics are that adolescents, and that specifically people ages 12 to 17%, 12 to 17 years old, followed by young adults 18 to 25 years old, had the highest rate of major depression. So this has been super hard. This has been a hard time for all of us, mental health wise, but especially our young people. So we want to really watch out. And risk factors associated for suicide among adolescents include any kind of psychiatric disorder. So again, if you've got a young person in your life, or if you are a young person suffering from these things, you want to really pay special care and special attention. So psychiatric disorders such as depression, bipolar, substance abuse, any kind of addictions, and conductive disorders, anxiety disorders, family history of depression or suicide, loss of a parent to death or suicide, physical and or sexual abuse. So if a young person's been physically or sexually abused, they're at risk of suicide. Lack of a social support network, feeling socially isolated, and bullying. So bullying is a big deal and can lead to suicide. So
there's more of that.
Yes, you are a youth resilience coach. So give us some hopeful, now that we've had this sobering.
Yes. Well, it starts with a change of mind. So what happens in any scientific progression and discovery is there's a man, I'm forgetting his name right now, but he was he wrote a powerful book on as science changes and we reach the end of one scientific paradigm and go into a more helpful one. We go from a crisis of complication to a solution of simplicity. That as we learn scientifically, we go from a proliferation of ideas, he says, to an understanding. And when we reach the understanding, things get a lot simpler. Now, we're not in this crisis because there hasn't been funding. We're not in this crisis because people haven't been trying. We're not in this crisis because so many well-intentioned, smart people have gone into, this crisis because what they've been studying, it turns out, has been complex, and there's been a proliferation of ideas, which is the sign of a crisis, and it hasn't been working. I have a quote from Thomas Insel, who was the National Institute of Mental Health director up until 2015. He said, whatever we've been doing for 5 decades, it ain't working. And when I look at the numbers of suicides, the numbers of disabilities, the mortality data, it's abysmal, and it's not getting any better. All the ways in which we've approached these illnesses, and with a lot of people working very hard, the outcomes we've got to this point are pretty bleak. That's coming from the director of the National Institute of Mental Health. That's a powerful statement. It ain't been working. But what's great when we realize something isn't working is that we can look at what does work. So I want to just give an idea. So I am an educator. I volunteer a lot for an organization called iHeart. It's one of many educational system curriculums for schools, innate health education and resiliency training. I do independent work, but I volunteer to support the organization because they are bringing the curriculum into schools. There's 2 other organizations bringing this curriculum into schools called Spark and the guidance side, they are being incredibly careful with evidence-based studies and research and documenting what is happening so that they can be, they're in upcoming journals they've been in journals of medicine, and they're going to be in more of them. But their results are fantastic. So what I want to share is iHeart, for example, in the past, it's only been around for a few years. 19,000 young people have now received that curriculum. They're in 20 countries around the world, and it is growing exponentially because it's working.
Sharon Strimling, will you, for our global audience, because we have 47,000 listeners every week for this show on UK Health Radio, which has 1.2 million listeners, can you share for our audience the website where people can go to find out about that curriculum?
Yes, I don't have all the websites, but I do have this one. So iHeartPrinciples.com, iHeartPrinciples.com. And you can see testimonials from the young people. There is a BBC News report on that website. If you scroll down, it's only 5 minutes long. And I was going to read you a couple of quotes from it because it's so inspiring. The Spark Institute, I think you can Google it, or I can find it for you and provide it to you. And the Guidance Side, which was started in British Columbia. Those are 3 curricula that are really, really something.
Okay.
Would you like to share a brief bit from that, or should we just move along and let people look it up?
I want to talk a little bit about going back, unfortunately, to the bleak part, and then we really want to talk about what works, because that's what we're wanting to talk about.
That's right.
So, teen suicide is higher among males and females. However, females generally have more attempts. Yeah. In the US, American Indian, Alaskan Native adolescents are at much higher risk for suicide. And white adolescents have a higher teen suicide risk compared with Asian Pacific Islander adolescents, Hispanic adolescents, and Black adolescents. Yeah. And you mentioned that suicide attempts are higher among students who self-identify as gay, lesbian, or bisexual, as compared with students who are identified as heterosexual. We also want to know the signs, because again, if you are one of these people who are thinking about it, or if you have a loved one who falls into these categories, you want to know what the signs are. So 4 out of 5 suicide deaths are preceded by warning signs. And these could be suicidal threats, previous suicide attempts, preoccupation or obsession with death, depression, and final arrangements. So if one of your loved ones is doing any of these things, you want to get them help immediately. And part of what we can all do is making it harder to die. So this includes building barriers on bridges, removing guns from your homes and at-risk youth, or if you have a gun, lock it up so that your young people cannot easily access it, and making sure that they get counseling and improving access to mental health resources. So Sharon Strimling, you are a youth resilience counselor. Yeah. What works? Here we are at the Natural Healing Show. Let's talk about what works.
Yes. Okay. Well, I want to back you up in saying, let's make this more difficult, because the thing about the act of suicide is that nobody takes that act from a moment where they're feeling okay. Like, moments come and go. And everybody, one of the things that we teach is that everybody has moods, right? And whether you consider yourself depressed or anxious or having, I come from a background of PTSD, depression, and anxiety, whether you have something like that, or whether you consider yourself mentally well, even the best of us, we have terrible thoughts sometimes. And I don't think we're open enough about that we have terrible thoughts. Most people I know, almost everybody I know, has had a suicidal thought. Does that make them suicidal? Well, not necessarily, but we can get really frightened by the thought. So I want to talk a little bit today about understanding. What we teach children now is to understand that they have moods, and that does not mean that they're broken, that there is something wrong with them, that they have moods, that they have terrible thoughts, that sometimes they don't want to be around, and that's their mind's best wisdom in that moment for finding peace, right? Like there is something in them that just, I'm gonna sort of help to kind of bring to the forefront the picture that we all have wisdom, we all have intuition, and we all have insight. And that is our starting point. But it works with what it's got. So if we're in agony, our best wisdom sometimes can be, let me get out of here. But the good news is that when we understand moods, we can start to realize that we've had agonizing thoughts over and over and over again, and they have always passed. The nature of thought is that it keeps moving. It keeps moving, and we normalize it for them. I had a youngster with me about a month ago. She was about to go into a psychiatric hospital. She was going to drop out of school. She was a star athlete. She was doing great in school. She was close to the end, but she was having terrible anxiety. She was cutting, and she was having eating stuff. And so she was ready to go into a psychiatric hospital, which I never, I trust people's wisdom. I never say anything pro or con against anything that people feels right to them. But her father asked her if she might want to come and work with me for a few days before doing that, because that would have meant the end of school. And this was 4 days. So she came. She didn't know that it was normal to have horrible thoughts, and she thought she was broken. She also didn't know the intelligence that continually it's part of nature. It's built into us. Like, we are not designed to self-destruct. We're designed to thrive. Everything in nature is, I have a picture sometimes I show of a tree growing out of the side of a cliff, right? That is nature, and we are nature. So there is a way that nature's trying to inform us. And if we're not caught in a misunderstanding that we are broken, or that our thinking is us, or the thought that thinking is permanent, which if we look back at our life, we will find we've never been able to hold on to a thought for more than a few seconds. It is not the nature of thought. So these are pieces of news that could seem obvious, but aren't necessarily obvious to young people. And when they learn it, it's a game changer for them. So sometimes what I do is I challenge somebody to have a thought, just a very simple thought. It can't be an idea. It has to be a thought, like the red nose on a clown. Just that. Just keep your mind there. How long can it last? Do it for a minute. Well, nobody lasts more than a few seconds. And they start to realize that even though we can think we're stuck in thinking, what we're doing is it's being recreated moment to moment to moment. And if we have a sense that our minds are designed to self-clear, which are other exercises that we show through people's own experiences, they can lean into that a little bit more and realize that a cleared mind will happen no matter how hard they try to stay down, whether they get hungry, enjoy the taste of something delicious, laugh at their puppy dog, notice a funny TV show, notice a tree. Their mind will come off of that. And so, to Catherine, to go back to what you said, if in the moment of the dark moment where it looks like it will last forever and there is no hope, we don't have easy access to a way out, chances are we are going to be glad when our thoughts clear and we're still here. We might not know, we might still be frightened. We might not know how to find a more steady state of well-being, but there's another opportunity for it to arrive. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And with that helpful wisdom, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our sponsors. So Sharon Strimling, youth resilience coach and educator, we're talking about what works and what we can do to prevent youth suicide. So you talked about helping to educate young people to realize that your thoughts will pass, and right? So
Yes.
in my work as a medical intuitive healer, I like to explain it like this. You have a physical body, okay? You are a soul. You're a soul having a human experience, and your soul controls your mind. And your mind, what is your mind? Your mind consists of your thoughts or beliefs. And beliefs. So Albert Einstein said the most important question is whether or not you consider the universe to be a friendly place. When you consider the universe to be a friendly place, then there can be helpful people everywhere. There can be a solution. We can find natural solutions. But your thoughts and your beliefs control your emotions. So what your core beliefs are control how you feel in any moment. So if I want to change how I feel, I can start by examining my thoughts and ask myself, is what I'm thinking helpful?
That's
Right?
right.
Yeah. I
Right.
may think I'm all alone, but is that really true? Maybe
Yeah.
there are helpful people out there. Maybe there are people who care about me. And maybe there are people who are just like me, who even if I've never met them, and if I can find a way to connect, I can feel better. And your emotions control your energy body, and your energy body controls your physical. So let's go back and talk more about what works, about what we can do to prevent youth suicide. So first you talked about understanding the mind and understanding our emotions.
Yes. So first of all, I want to say Albert Einstein is a fabulous resource. I have a page full of quotes from him. He knew very deeply into the way that the intuitive and the analytical mind work together. So there are things to be done, and we talk about those. I want to be clear that there's a couple of the most powerful things that are done, in my experience, are two pieces of education. That in addition to taking practical steps within the home, like, or practical steps within a human being, like in addition to just following the wisdom that is built into us and doing things that make sense and are common sense, common because they're built into life. There's two pieces of understanding that, in my experience, we need to have and we need to give our young people. And those two pieces are a game changer. So when this young woman came, one of the things that happened was for her to understand that she was not her thinking. As you said, we are not our thinking. Thinking is something that happens and it passes through. So there's a less of an identification with it. And we all have crazy thoughts, and we can normalize that. And to understand that the nature of thoughts is that they keep moving. If we don't hang on to them, they keep moving. The nature of thought is also that we have moods. And when we were in a low mood, we literally have a lower IQ. We literally see less. It's like being in the bottom of a well, and of course, everything looks dark. And we can't necessarily change that. Like, that's the nature of being in a low mood. So when you're in a low mood, you don't have to beat yourself up. When you're in a low mood, you can know that every other human being, you talked, Catherine, about us being kind of in it together. The beauty of the system of the mind is it's the same for all of us. We share that in common. We have individual craziness to our thoughts. We have individual, variations of thought, but ultimately we have the same functions. One of them is that we think and we have moods. And when we are in a low mood, it will look real. We cannot blame ourselves for that. That's why we can enjoy a movie. We go into a movie and it convinces us it's real for the most part. So we feel it, we grieve, we get upset, we get scared, but we don't mind. We pay for it. We don't mind the emotions. We mind that when we have the emotions, we think they mean something about ourselves. We forget that life is essentially like a movie. Our thoughts are like a movie. And we can experience them with a little bit more distance, like, this is a really bad movie and I'm not liking it, but it will pass. And then from higher levels of mood, and we have greater perspective, it's like we're up in the sky and we can see the whole territory, and we can get that there's people that love us, and we can get that, there's wisdom to life, and we can get that we don't always feel horrible. And we can learn that those moods go up and down every day for all of us, for everyone. That's normal. And we can learn to trust more that when we can see the greater landscape, that holds more truth. And when we're in the bottom of the well, we can't see so clearly. So maybe we don't want to trust it so well. So that's one of the pieces of education that people just need to get. But what I always say is, please don't take my word for it. And this is why when we're working with people, we want young people to test this for themselves and see if it's true, because trusting me does no good. But they'll start to notice, oh, that's true. That's true. And then their own realization, their own insight, their own wisdom from within will back them up.
Wonderful information. Now, for our audience, 2 of my 10 books are about how to heal depression without drugs. And the most recent, in the most recent book, Banish the Blues Now, one of the things that I talk about is how you can change your mood and change the way you feel by changing the way that you take care of your body. So, for example, blood sugar. I always joke the key to life is balancing your blood sugar. So if you haven't eaten for a while, your blood sugar drops. And when every time your blood sugar drops, your serotonin level goes down. What is serotonin? It's a neurotransmitter. It's a brain chemical. You need to have serotonin in order to feel happy. So when you don't eat, when you starve yourself, and a lot of people, teenagers, are on different starvation diets, or people with eating disorders may have disrupted their serotonin. So when you eat small amounts frequently, you balance your blood sugar, and that is a major contributor to balancing your mood. And so simple steps: balancing your blood sugar by eating small amounts of healthy food regularly, exercise. Scientific research, Duke University shows that they did a study. It was interesting. They took 3 groups of people. One group exercised, one group took antidepressants and exercise, and a third group did nothing. These were all depressed people. And short term, the group that took antidepressants and exercise did as well as the group that exercised. Long term, for treating depression and overcoming depression, the group that used exercise alone did better for healing depression than the people who took drugs. The third group just took drugs. I forget.
That's right.
The antidepressants. So when you want to feel better, balance your blood sugar by eating small amounts frequently and exercise. And of course, there's all different kinds of exercise. Young people, one young person may relate to yoga, someone else might relate to weight training or cycling or walking. But and then the third thing that I'm a major advocate for is breath work. And what I like about breathing exercises is that you can do them anytime, anywhere. And one of my books is called The Little Book of Breath Work. During the pandemic, I gave it away for free to people in 17 different countries. And it's my experience in 28 years of healing. When I have a client suffering from anxiety, I can literally cut their anxiety in half, at least by half, in 8 minutes. Xanax doesn't even work that fast.
That's right.
Right? Marijuana doesn't work that fast. So balance your blood sugar, find forms of exercise that work for you, and learn breath work. Because what my experience in working with many young people, teenagers, is that often they're not willing or able to talk about what's really bothering them. Maybe there's some shame there. They don't want to admit, they feel bad about actions they've taken. But you can move your energy with breath work, and it's incredibly powerful. So Sharon Strimling, as you work with as a youth resilience coach and educator, what are some of the natural healing remedies that you use with people that you find incredibly helpful?
I love that you went there, Catherine. So actually, we are starting an internship in a month, and we'll be doing this annually with young people ages 18 to 28, 3 weeks on Martha's Vineyard, 7 months of training. And in that will be the education that we're talking about. Then there will be the wonders of nature, biomimicry and cosmology and all kinds of cool stuff where we get to really see the intelligence of nature. There will be breath work. There will be an understanding of holistic health and actually even exercising aligned with circadian rhythms and lunar rhythms, which is wonderful for cortisol. I was a health coach before this, so I resonate with everything you're sharing. And those tools are so, so, so helpful. When I'm working with people, the first thing I want them to do, honestly, Catherine, the first thing that I want is for them to realize that they have wisdom. And that just because it doesn't always show its face, it's there. And they'll start to tap it when their moods naturally rise and as they're less frightened by their thought experience. Now, from that place, usually not from the bottom of the barrel, they get tapped into the fact that this food isn't helping them and that food is, and sitting around isn't helping them, but moving is. And so my job as in the role that I take now is to follow their lead and their wisdom. As long as they know they have it, they will find good foods, they will find good exercise. And then they say, well, what are good foods and how do they work? And what are the best kinds of exercise? And what can I eat? And banana peels have antidepressants in them, cashews. I mean, these things are amazing, right? So you can really start to have that conversation in more depth. In 10 hours, the iHeart program is only 10 hours long. And I'm just going to give you a quick taste of what people can get in 10 hours before they speak at all, which they don't, about nutrition, et cetera, et cetera. They leave it up to the young people's wisdom, but 95% of children noticed a positive change in themselves. Attendance went up 75%. Exclusions, which in England, that means getting expelled, dropped by 65%. Absenteeism fell by 55%. These are really meaningful numbers. And what this one man, one of my colleagues who shares in the school, he led with this sentence: there is something amazingly powerful in each and every one of you. The assistant head teacher says, if we're going to have any chance of battling the mental health crisis, we've got to get this into schools immediately. How I've seen it work and the impact it had on our most vulnerable, disadvantaged peoples is extraordinary. The Journal of Mental Health said it offered a step change in mental health education. The research agency, youth agency, hailed the curriculum as a huge success, saying it had prevented young people's well-being from entering a negative spiral during the pandemic. There were a whole cadre of people during the pandemic who were not harmed because what they understood, and this is the second point of the education, what they understood in the second part of the education is that our experience doesn't come directly from the outside. We are not experiencing events, pandemics, even to some extent our chemistry, and I can talk about that, and our food. We're experiencing a infinitely variable experience of how that's hitting our consciousness. So in other words, our experience in the moment is creative, which means that I worked with a man who was in and out of 9/11 saving people. And because he had been an anxious man who had never been able to connect with people and was always in his head, it was the most presence and peace he'd ever had in his life. Now, he didn't want that to happen. He wasn't a good thing, but in his personal experience, he was not traumatized. He actually found meaning and peace and stillness while he was helping people. So to understand that, you spoke about bullying, to understand that, well, we don't want to have, I don't want to live in a world where bullying is rampant. I don't want to live in a world where the people who are suffering bully. There has been and if I know you need another commercial break, I want to tell a quick story. I can come back to it. Should I come back to it?
Let's take a break.
Yeah, and then I'll share this story because it's powerful.
All right, and we're going to take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors. So Sharon Strimling, youth resilience coach and educator, I know you have a story to tell, but again, I really want to talk about action steps. So, and what people can do. So share your story and let's talk about what people can do. Action
Okay.
steps.
Okay. So the story is quick. It is that, all right. So there was a tragic event. There was a young man who killed himself. He was fired from a job. He was not expecting it. The company did not handle it well. And I read this and my heart broke. And the point of the article was that we have to be sensitive to what young people are going through right now. We need to take time with them. And that is true. What's also true is that, in my opinion, unless we let people know how brilliant they are and how resilient they are, and they see it for themselves, we are raising a generation that thinks they are too fragile, that thinks they can be broken by a bully. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have bullying. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt, but I'm saying that people, since the beginning of time, people have survived atrocities. We are built stronger than that. And there's a beautiful piece about someone talking about a crumpled piece of paper and how when we're bullied, it's like scrunching up the paper. And then we open the paper and we can lay it flat, but the crinkles will never come out. And then somebody says, we're so lucky we are not paper.
And
right?
absolutely. And, that brings me to an exercise that I do when I'm working with young people. Okay. And the way I like to explain it is this: is just like your physical health, when we have a strong immune system, we're less likely to get sick. And when we have good self-esteem, when I know I'm a valuable person, and when I feel good about myself, that's like having a strong psychological immune system. So here's a very simple way that you can build your self-esteem. And you can do this for yourself, and you can do this with any young person, because a lot of times we don't realize what's good about us. So what you do is you make a list of your top 20 personal qualities. And I recommend that you start with 20. You may even think of more. So you may say, I'm funny, or I have a good sense of humor, or I'm kind, or I'm a good friend, or I'm smart, I'm resilient. And anyway, you make a list. And if it's helpful, you also reach out to friends of yours, maybe family members, to help you, so that you start to see what's special about you. You're intuitive, you're physically coordinated, you're good at football, you're good at dancing, you've got a great sense of rhythm. You make a list of your personal qualities, and then you write them in I am statements, as I'm intelligent, I'm resilient, I'm kind, I'm a great friend. And you write these I am statements, and then you take your phone and you record. You make one recording. You go to your voice memo section. I have an iPhone, so I go to my iPhone and make a voice memo, a single voice memo, and you record these I am statements in your own voice. Now, the reason that's important is because what I think about me is the most important opinion that I have. So let's say, for example, I think I'm intelligent. I know I'm intelligent. So if somebody says to me, Catherine, you're a dum-dum, well, that sort of bounces off of me because I know what I think about myself. So Sharon Strimling, in your experience as a youth resilience educator and coach, how important is building our self-esteem and building young people's self-esteem important? How important is critical is that for preventing suicide?
The trick with that is a very valuable exercise for people who feel like they can name those things and they can believe them, like that will work for them. There are a lot of people I work with who would struggle to make a list and believe it, and they might be doing it for me. But what they will see is that when their mind settles They will have moments where their mind settles and they're not necessarily even thinking about themselves. Their self-esteem is a pre-existing quality. We are basically fine when we're not thinking about ourselves, and we don't have to think about ourselves so much. In fact, we can, the greatest pleasure in life can come out of when they, kids see that they feel good about themselves when they're helping other people and they're not thinking about themselves. They love to help their friends. They love to do good things in life. So there's a way that what is fail proof. So in addition to that is that we can see that the moment that I'm even, just interested in the sunrise, my well-being is there, my self-esteem is there, that it is a default, not necessarily something that has to be built. We can build it, but without building and without thought, it pre-exists. Now, in that space, we have common sense and we see things that are helpful for ourselves. Now, you asked for things that we do. So what I do primarily is know in my heart that the person that I'm looking at is unbroken. I know that 100%. And if I'm not sure, I look into myself and I find it. Or I look for the things in them. Like I look at them when they're playing. I look at them when they're laughing. I look for evidence of how they are still in there, even though they have terrible thinking. And I believe it first. That's the number one thing I do. When I show up with that young person, I know they are unbroken and unbreakable in their spirit. And so I can sit with them knowing that. And then I work with them so that they can see that in themselves. And then I listen to their wisdom. What is it for you? What is it? What do you do when you're feeling good? What are you doing? What's life like around you? What does the world look like around you? Like when you're feeling good, if that's a trustworthy space, which most people say, yeah, it does seem trustworthy when I'm there, it does seem real. It's not just pie in the sky. It's not positive thinking. It's not anything I'm trying to do. When I'm with my friends, I just relaxed and I come up with good ideas. I get creative. I want to help people. Like these young people see ways in which they are beautiful and they show up beautifully when their minds settle. And then we build on that. So they become my teacher. My intention isn't to put things into a young person. My intention is for them to realize they're already built with it and to draw it out. And to me, that's the ultimate natural healing. You do not have anything I have to add strength or resilience to. You are born as part of nature with all of that built into you. It doesn't always look like that to you. It doesn't always look like that to me. That's the human condition, but we can remind each other of that. Keep your home safe. Have people you can call when you're really struggling. Hopefully have people who will care about you when you're struggling, but not be terrified. One way that we can show up for people is to pay attention to those signals, but we don't want to get freaked out every time somebody has a suicidal thought or says, I don't want to be alive. We want to remember, we want to stay in that place of like, yeah, I get it. Me too. That's normal, right? Because otherwise we build this fear and this tension and this intensity around something. And the moment a child thinks they're broken, which is happening all the time right now, the moment they think they are diagnosable this way, diagnosable that way, diagnosable this way, they run with it and they're afraid. And then they notice that their parents are afraid. And then they notice that their therapists and their teachers are afraid. And then we come along and we say, it's easy to get scared by life. Me too. But
That's
when
such,
we're not scared, there's something else. Let's listen to that.
yeah, that's such a powerful message, Sharon Strimling. And I agree with you 100% that you are a soul having a human experience.
Yes.
And I agree with you. I don't look at people as broken. You always have everything you need in any moment, even if it's just a phone number. It's
That's
like,
right.
and the reason that is an absolute scientific truth is that there is no such thing as a vacuum in the universe. A vacuum does not exist.
Right.
So in any moment, you have everything you need. You are enough. You are enough. You're good enough. You have enough.
Yes.
And when you tune in, it's like, well, what do I need right now? What do I need right now in order to feel better? And final thought, Sharon Strimling.
Yes.
because someone listening to this broadcast may actually be in an acute state,
Yes,
and they may not be feeling their wholeness. And
that's right.
they may not be valuing themselves, and they may not be realizing what's special about them,
That's
and
right.
why they're a valuable person.
That's it.
When someone is in an acute state, when a young person is in an acute state, what are some of the most important steps that can be taken to help that person?
Yeah, well, I suppose it depends on the level of acuteness. Calling a hotline, going to an ER at that stage, that's what you do. You just get safe, right? A few steps before that, like I'm plummeting, I'm feeling horrible. What can I do? They can reach out to, there's a website 24/7. There are a few gaps because it's still new, but around the world, 24/7, heartfeltpresence.org. It is a free website. Anybody can go on. You can have your video off. You can have, now this is not a suicide hotline. This is a well-being support listening space and coaching space, but you can go on with your video off, your audio off. You can just listen. Or you can turn your video on and ask for help. There will be other coaches who share what I share, the same kind of education. You can get this. You really, there's no substitute for, even in any small way, just tapping into what makes sense to you to do. Anything other than ending your life, you will have another chance. Sometimes we just gotta hang on, and it feels like hanging on like on a roller coaster, the really, really awful scary part, or the scary part of the movie. Sometimes all you gotta do is hang on and know that that thought will pass. And then you might have an idea. I'm gonna call someone. I'm gonna go to sleep. I'm gonna take a shower. I'm gonna run. I'm going to scream at the top of my lungs. Like, there is wisdom built into us. I would listen for that, and always, always, always reach out for help if you don't know what to do.
Very powerful message. You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Our guest today has been Sharon Strimling. Sharon Strimling is a youth resilience coach and educator, and you can find out more about her wonderful work at sharonstrimling.com. And remember, you are whole. There, you have everything you need in order to be you and to fulfill your soul purpose in this lifetime. And if you need help, reach out. Everyone is here for you. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.